Now, to further unpack what this geopolitical uncertainty means for us here in Australia, I'm joined by Peter Jennings, the Executive Director of the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Peter, thank you so very much for your time. Now,
Thanks,
we
Jenna.
saw today former Prime Minister John Howard has said our mission to Afghanistan wasn't unsuccessful, but today he has admitted that leaving a small presence in the country would have been a better strategy. What's your thoughts on that and Mr Howard's take?
I completely agree with him. I think that this was absolute folly on the part of Joe Biden and almost Joe Biden alone to conclude that the smart thing to do after 20 years of military operations in Afghanistan was simply to race out of the country as quickly as they could, removing all of the vital enablers like logistics and maintenance and air cover for the Afghan military. And so John Howard's view that keeping a small force there, not necessarily to fight the Taliban, but to enable the Afghan military and to give confidence to the Afghan government was a much more sensible approach and one, frankly, that we should have followed were it not for what I can only describe as a sort of emotional reaction on the part of Joe Biden.
Yeah. Retrospectively, do you think we could move back in there, or is that just we've completely passed the post now with that suggestion?
Oh, I think it's a busted flush at this point. Really, what will be the determining factor of that is the extent to which Afghanistan once again becomes a safe haven for terrorist organisations. And of course, there it's not just the Taliban; it's Al-Qaeda, it's the Islamic State, and a whole bunch of other offshoots. The Taliban is not really going to be in a position to control those groups, particularly in remote provincial areas of Afghanistan. So if we start to see threats coming back to the West, that could at the very least lead to airstrikes and other activities designed to try to destroy those terror groups. But right now, no US administration on either side of American politics, I think, has any appetite for ground wars in the Middle East. And so I think we're just going to have to live with whatever chaos emerges in Afghanistan probably for quite some time.
So I guess the Americans were the thread that sort of kept that doona together. There was no realistic possibility that we could have stayed on without them.
I think that's right. It was very interesting to see just recently that the British sought to talk to NATO about was it possible for some sort of European military presence there. But Boris Johnson very quickly, determined that 98% of the airstrikes were being done by American forces. The vast bulk of intelligence work was being done by American capabilities. There really was no capacity for a non-American force to stay on in the country. And of course, that's why we've seen all of those military forces, including our own, get out at the pace that we did, because we knew that once the Americans were out, there was no practical reality that could keep our forces secure on the ground in Kabul or any other part of Afghanistan.
Yeah, and I just watching US, I feel like we wake up every morning now, and what we saw this morning, we saw 4 flights overnight and about 554 people have been rescued so far by our ADF. But some Afghan security guards who protected our embassy have been advised they aren't eligible for visas and are being told to apply for one of the 3,000 humanitarian places that the government allotted last week. What's that about?
I wish I could tell you. I'm just astonished at what appears to be a leaden bureaucratic process of telling people to go and consult different websites and to make applications for visas that we know can take months or years to be processed in the face of what is an immense humanitarian crisis that is playing out in the country right now. I would also have to say that I fear for the lives of those security guards. It seems to me that what the Taliban is doing is allowing foreigners out of the country because they are going to be harder to deal with, harder to kill. But when they're gone and when the aircraft have left never to return, I think the Taliban, has not learned how to be Democrats in Doha. They are going to revert to be the cold-hearted killers that they were 20 years ago. And people that were associated with the Afghan military, people that were associated like security guards with an embassy, they will be in deep, deep trouble. So I'm alarmed that they're sort of getting form letters, it would appear, from the Department of Foreign Affairs saying, "Oh, we can't help you here. Consider applying for an emergency visa." Really, the challenge is how do we actually just get those folk to the airport? How can we get them on aeroplanes, and then allow the paperwork to catch up with them afterwards, where they can be dealt with in a more peaceful location?